Please state your question before we move it.
Okay. This is my first time at this committee, and so I'm trying to reconcile a staff recommendation and an LAO recommendation that's really going against the staff recommendation. So, is that how you guys work around here? I want to make sure that as I'm taking a position on an issue that, we're all on the same team and we're all on the same path and we're evaluating these issues in the same way. And so I want to, and I'm hearing testimony, and I'm trying to reconcile, I want to move things along, but I also want to make sure that I'm clear on what LAO is saying as it relates to the staff recommendation and why they can't be done concurrently, or why you're asking us to.
Yeah, staff, I'm going to ask you to answer that, and I want to make sure that if you're uncomfortable moving forward with this today and we need additional information, I'm more than happy to hold it over for another time, but I would like staff to answer your question.
Okay. Drew Soderborg, Legislative Analyst's Office. So I'll answer your broader question before I turn it over to Aaron. Our office is, as I'm sure you're aware, nonpartisan advisors to the legislature. We analyze all of the proposals that come before you independently and come to our own conclusions. And oftentimes staff who work directly for the committee will come to alternative conclusions. So this isn't necessarily unique. Now, to your specific question about our concerns, I'll go ahead and let Aaron answer that one.
Sure. I think so. Our concerns with this, were really that we didn't think the department had provided a very compelling rationale for why the program should be operated as a 1-year versus a 2-year program. I think you've heard the department sort of present their case for why that would work. So, I think it's kind of up to you to determine whether you think that's a compelling rationale or not. I think from our standpoint, we still sort of feel like given the lack of information about how this program is going to work for male offenders, they're forced with a decision: should it go forward as a 2-year program, similar to the way the female program is already operated, or should they reduce it to a 1-year program? It's impossible to know how it's going to play out, of course. And so I think reasonable people can differ in terms of what the right approach is. From our standpoint, it kind of makes sense to continue doing what it is they're doing, particularly given that shortening it could negatively impact the female offenders. They think that's a small impact. We haven't seen the data, but I think it's up to you to kind of assess based on their case, where do you want to
You say you haven't seen the data. It's because, why haven't you seen it?
We requested it from the department, and we had not received it. They said it was not possible when we requested about a month ago to provide data on the number of female offenders who would be impacted. The data wasn't available on that at that time, so that's why we haven't seen the data.
Is the data available now?
So we don't have the data when they say who would be impacted, because each individual case is identified, and so until you would get it in front of an applicant doesn't actually mean that they would be allowed out of the program. So that would become a one-on-one scenario. What I do have is the data that would say who would be out there, who is out there currently today, and then what that percentage number would have affected at that time. And so it was a very low percentage of women who had been out there with over the 12-month scenario that was out there. Most of the women have about 12 to 15 months to do when they're out there and processing out. And so we try and effectively, we go out into the institutions and pass out the applications, talk to the women, and really try and get them from even as far as going into the county jails and handing out the applications to make sure that they're able to start as soon as possible. We believe in the program and have had good outcomes from the program, so we support it. We also believe, though, with the male ACP, the unknowns of rolling out the program, to do it effectively, the large scale, like I said, over the entire state, getting that rolled out there. Let us look at that program as we roll that out and then make an effective decision at a later time.
Yes, please. Department of Finance.
I'd just like to clarify that the reduction in time from 2 years to 1 year for the ACP would not affect the females who are currently participating in the program, regardless of their time left to serve. They would be grandfathered in, so this would only impact those females going forward who have more than 1 year left to serve.
Mr. Holden, do you have any other questions? Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable, I guess, moving forward, but I still would like to maybe have a conversation and try to get a little bit more information on how your comfort level is derived at and whether or not that information would change the LAO's perspective on this. I mean, I'm not weighing heavily, and I guess as time goes on, I'll be in a little bit different place of how, having drawn on a lot of this information myself and be able to respond differently. But so I'm happy to move forward, but I would like to have an opportunity to have conversation and get additional information.
So that's a motion.
It is.
And do we have a second on this item?
I'll go ahead and second the motion, but I won't be supporting the motion.
Right. Okay, that's fair. So we have a motion and a second. And before we take a roll call on this, what I would like to see, because I think that we do have a new member on this committee, is that for you all to meet with him and give him a briefing. I had my briefing, and it helped me feel a little more comfortable on some of these items. Because just like you, Mr. Holden, I was concerned about some of the things, and sometimes having a dialogue and being able to understand the overview of these items that are very crucial gives you the opportunity to ask some in-depth questions, as well as to be able to review some of the material that in advance before we come in. So I would hope that we could get that briefing with him as soon as possible.
Absolutely. We're happy to.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Madam Chair, why didn't I get a briefing? Did I have to ask for it, or was someone going to just call and say, you know what, let's brief the new member?
I think, in preparation for hearings, we tend to work with staff on outstanding questions and try to get information to the committee as needed. I don't think that usually for every pre-hearing that we have individual briefings with members, but given the unique circumstances, we'll be more thoughtful of that in the future.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I'll withhold my support till I get the briefing.
Okay, then that was what I asked you
Yeah, I
earlier,
know,
that if
and
you
I-
wanted to, I was more than comfortable, because this is a topic that it requires a lot of attention, because we're making some very tough decisions.
Sure.
So what we'll do is we'll hold this item over, and I think that'll make Mr. Lackey feel a little bit more comfortable too. And so if you have some questions around this too, please feel comfortable to. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just, I'm not asking you to give a briefing on every, but I think an overview would be helpful with all the members if it hasn't happened. I don't know, Mr. Lackey, if you ever had an overview, but you've been on the committee for a while, so I think you understand.
I just have an opinion.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So this is Mr. Holden's first time attending this, so an overview just on public safety and the budget I think would be helpful for him as well. And then on an as-needed basis, if he has a concern as he looks at the agenda and his staff, he can call you and have you come in. So with that, we'll hold it over and we'll address this. We weren't going to take a vote today, but you were here, and so I thought we would go ahead and see if everyone
My
was comfortable.
apologies.
No, that's not a problem. So we'll move on to the next item. Any other questions on this item? Okay, thank you. So expansion of programs and services for lifer population. CDCR will open this issue and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, with this issue, the department requests $10.5 million and 56 positions in budget year, growing to $16.1 million and 56 positions in 2018-19 and ongoing, to expand programs and services for long-term offenders. In budget year, this includes $3.1 million to expand the parole service centers beds by 136 statewide, $3.4 million to increase available long-term offender program slots by 1,700 at a male level 3 or 4 facility to be determined, $423,000 to expand the offender mentor certification program by 64 slots per year, $3.1 million to expand the pre-employment transitions program from being offered at reentry hubs only to being offered at all prisons, and $480,000 for custody staff overtime to oversee evening college courses for this population. These programs are designed to provide evidence-based rehabilitative programs that are structured specifically for offenders serving or who have served long periods of incarceration. Due to the amount of time that these individuals have spent in our prisons, they often need more in the way of specialized programming than our average offender. Life-term offender-specific issues, such as adapting to technological changes, developing pro-social networks, managing family dynamics, and dealing with the stigma of incarceration, are most effectively addressed by programs specifically designed to address these issues. I'm joined by Cynthia Flores de Leon of our Division of Rehabilitative Programs, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Okay, and we'll go to the same process if Finance has any added comments.
Kia Cha, Department of Finance. The long-term offender population, as the department has mentioned, is a population with unique needs given the lengthy time that they've served in the state prisons. Even though more and more long-term offenders have been are being released, there are a few programs targeting their needs. We would note that from 2009 to 2014, the annual purple grants for long-term offenders increased from 541 to 902. That's annually, and it's an increase of about 67%. We believe this proposal provides important services for the successful reintegration of long-term offenders back into the community, and we continue to support the proposal as the request as proposed.
Jonathan Peterson with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We prepared a handout to go over this proposal in more detail, which hopefully you have out in front of you. The department gave an overview on the proposal and some of the background on long-term offenders, which we cover on the first 2 pages of our first 3 pages of our handout. So I'll start on page 3, which gives you a table of the long-term offender proposal and the specific programs that are involved over the 3-year period, so that you can see how that $10.5 million augmentation increases up to from 2016-17 through 2018-19. I want to start by describing our assessment of the proposal. I think for us, the idea of long-term offenders are typically lower risk offenders because of the fact that they go through an exhaustive review process through the Board of Parole hearings, and they aren't granted release unless they are deemed low risk through this Board of Parole hearings process and are released on parole. The research that we have looked at shows that targeting higher risk offenders yields greater public safety benefits than targeting the lower risk offenders would be. Lower risk offenders are less likely to reoffend irrespective of whether they receive programming. For the proposal, there's only a portion of the funding that targets higher risk offenders. Specifically, this would include our analysis would include the Offender Mentorship Certification Program, the Transitions Program, and expanding overtime for the community college programs. Also, there are many higher risk offenders that are aren't having all of their needs met with the current rehabilitative programming. So if the expansions that do not target this population, we would still have a significant portion of high-risk offenders who are not receiving not having all of their rehabilitative needs met through current rehabilitation offerings. So given those factors, what we recommend is that the legislature approve the expansion of programming for higher-risk offenders, and we covered these recommendations on page 6 of our handout. And that would be a total of $4 million that targets these higher risk offenders, and then reject the remainder of the proposal that specifically targets the low risk long-term offenders who are less likely to commit future crimes. So given that the legislature, if it's interested in increasing rehabilitative programming for offenders, if the goal is to, if the goal that's most important to the legislature is a reduction in recidivism, that targeting higher risk offenders would probably yield greater public safety benefits than some of the proposed program expansions in this proposal. And that if the legislature is interested in further programming targeting higher risk offenders, could be a more productive move forward if the goal is to increase or decrease recidivism. Thank you.
That was well done in showing the differences at the table once again on where one department looks at it from one lens and another department looks at it from another lens. I think that as members of this committee, this is where we have to make decisions on where we want to spend the money or where we think that it's best to spend the money. So with that, are there any questions so that we can have a conversation around that? Mr. Holden or Mr. Rodriguez, do you have any questions at this time? We're not taking a vote on it. It's just more for discussion at this time. Mr. Rodriguez, you're fine? Mr. Holden, you're good? Okay. We're now going to go to public comment. Please come to the front, to the mic, and state your name. If you're with an organization, please state the organization as well. And you have a minute. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Eva Delara, staff attorney at Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. And I just wanted to speak to the importance of programming, particularly after the Ashker settlement. More than 1,000 people who've been in the SHU for years and years are now being moved into level 3 and level 4 programming. All of these people, from the moment they were put in segregation, have not received substantive rehabilitative or educational programming. So the number of people who need these programs is getting larger. So I'd just like to encourage the legislature to put more than the $10 million. And in fact, there's $5.8 million being put towards the ISU, which I know is not being discussed today, but I would suggest that that also goes to educational and programming. Education has been shown to be the highest, most effective way to reduce recidivism. The IGI, CDCR's failed gang policies are not protecting public safety. In fact, since people are getting out of the SHU, violence within the prisons has gone down where these people are going. Thank you.
Helen Roth Dowden, representing SEIU Local 1000, the teachers in the state prison. We've seen these programs cut, and we know that rehabilitation and education programs work. So we support what the governor is putting in the budget. It's based on that we know whether they're low-risk offenders or high-risk offenders, they are going to get something out of these programs that are being newly reconstituted within the prisons. So we urge support for the governor's proposal. Thank you.
Hello, Lizzie Buchan with Californians United for a Responsible Budget. First, I appreciate the perspective of the person who wrote to the CDCR and would like to offer that if you would like other letters, we have received dozens of letters from people who have been transferred to the EACP and to any of these programs. We're happy to provide those letters from other perspectives. Second, I think that for this item, it brings up a really important issue, which is the fact that people are serving extremely long, severe sentences in our prisons, and that the problem that that people have been locked up since before the internet was around is obviously a major problem that is not going to be completely addressed just by some programming inside. The real way to make an impact on people who are returning to their communities is reducing their sentences and providing them services and programs in the communities. There's a large body of research showing that programs and services are much more effective when they're provided in communities and not in incarcerative settings. If you have someone who is who is poor, unemployed, doesn't have adequate education, and you put them in prison for 30 years and then return them to their low-income community, they're not more likely to find jobs, even if they have some programming inside. And so I understand that sentence reduction is not on the agenda today, but I would encourage this body to be more ambitious.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to, any other concerns? We'll move forward. We will not be voting on this at this time. It's an item just for hearing and discussion. And now we're going to move to item number 4. Is that correct? Male community reentry. No, it's item 5. I'm sorry. Item 5. And I will ask CDCR will open on this issue and give us an overview of the request to resources to aid in the supervision of sex offenders.
Okay. The department requests $32.1 million for the continuation of the MCRP in budget year and ongoing. About 70% of this funding, or about $22.6 million, is tied specifically to the contract costs. The average cost is about $105 a day for these programs.
So just for the public, we are on item 4. I misspoke. I was right when I said item 4. And then we'll go to item 5. Thank you.
Okay. Further, the budget proposes to expand the eligibility criteria from offenders within 120 days of their release to within 180 days of their release. The standard staffing package for an MCRP facility consists of 1 parole agent 2, 1 correctional counselor 3, and 1 24-hour, 7-day-a-week correctional officer post. The MCRP was first established courtesy of the Recidivism Reduction Fund back in 2014-15. We've now opened 3 facilities total, 1 in Los Angeles, 1 in Kern, and 1 in Butte counties. These 3 facilities include 220 available beds combined. The department anticipates opening 2 more facilities in current year and 2 more in budget year for a total of 7 facilities, offering 680 beds by the end of 2016-17. I'm joined again by Ms. Flores de Leon, if you have any questions for her about this proposal.
I don't have any questions at that time. If you would like to add anything else, please do so at this time.
Yeah, I'd just like to provide a little bit perspective on the program. It's a relatively new program. Our first male community reentry was opened up in April of 2015 in Los Angeles. Our second one was in May of 2015, and a third one this January in Butte County. We are currently working to open up 2 additional male community reentry facilities. And just a little bit about the programs and services that we are seeing a benefit for those inmates that are returning to their home community at the last 120 days of their sentence. They are receiving a wide range of community linkages while they're out back in the community, substance use treatment if that's needed when they go back, employment, educational services, housing, family reunification, and assistance with the signing up for Medi-Cal and receiving treatment in the community where they will be residing. Currently, just as some numbers, we've since April of last year, 424 inmates have been given the opportunity to participate in the program at these 3 locations.
We'll go through the same process. Finance, Department of Finance, if you have anything to add.
Sure. Lizzie Perrin, Department of Finance. I would just add that we believe that this program has shown success and see a benefit in continuing to invest in the reintegration of offenders to society. And then once as the department described, once the program is fully implemented, it will show 7 contracted facilities with a total of 680 beds. Just to add a couple of points on historical funding and what's being proposed here, $20 million from the Recidivism Reduction Fund was allocated towards this program in 14-15, and then the unspent funds were repurposed in 15-16. So I just want to make sure it's clear that this proposal requests to backfill those current service level funds with general fund dollars, and then provide an increase to expand the series in the budget year, and then move forward from there. Thank you.
Jonathan Peterson from the Legislative Analyst's Office. So we had some concerns about this proposal that I'll go over. First, this is the program, as we understand it, is a volunteer program. So you as an inmate can volunteer to be a part of the male community reentry program as long as you meet certain criteria, not being an escape risk and several other criteria. Our concern, though, is that because it is a volunteer program, the program does not target the higher risk offenders who are most likely to commit future crimes when they're released. And because it does not target these offenders and targets people on a first-come, first-served basis, that it might not be the most effective program designed to reduce recidivism because, again, those higher-risk offenders, there are some lower-risk offenders who are in the program, and it's not targeted at the higher-risk offenders. So the benefit to public safety might not be as great as a program that is targeted towards higher-risk offenders. I'd also note that the program is a very costly one to operate. So while it's still not up and running, our estimate that we included in our overview of this program in our report was that it was about $58,000 per bed. So you can, of course, put multiple people in a bed because it's currently a 120-day maximum length of the program. But when you include the contract costs and the administrative costs, that even if it was targeted at higher risk offenders, that it would still not be the most cost-effective way to reduce recidivism, which we know is a goal that many people share as far as rehabilitative programming. And so given that, as we mentioned earlier, there's this group of higher-risk offenders that is not currently having all of their needs met, we recommend the legislature reject funding for the male community reentry program, and that to the extent the legislature is interested in expanding rehabilitative programming, it can direct the department to come back with a proposal that is targeted at higher-risk offenders to increase the impact on public safety. Thank you.